Hi everyone, it's Jonny Khatru, and in this video I'm going to be listening to the first Alcest album, Souvenirs d'un autre monde. Alcest are a black metal, blackgaze band from France, and this album came out in 2007. I tried to guess what the meaning of the album title is in English, and I came up with Souvenirs from Another World. But it turns out souvenirs is a false friend. In French, it actually means memories. So the album title means Memories from Another World. On a related matter, knowing this band is from France, I've been pronouncing the band name Alcest, like I'll say. But I quickly looked into it before making this video and found that the correct pronunciation is Alcest. 𝐿𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐵 wins again. I've been into black metal for about a decade now. Some of my favorites in the genre are the Norwegian second wave acts Darkthrone and 𝐒𝐻𝐵𝐿. Other favorites of mine from the more atmospheric side of black metal include Summoning and 𝐒𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐤 in particular. I'm a real diehard fan of 𝐒𝐢𝐬𝐬. What I tend to look for in music in general is magic. And the best albums by these bands are some of the most reality-bending, darkly magical albums I've ever heard. A more recent development in black metal is the emergence of this thing called blackgaze, which is ostensibly a mix between black metal and shoegaze music. This seems in theory to sound like something I would enjoy quite a bit, but in practice, the results have been somewhat mixed for me. The most well-known band in this style is probably Deafheaven from the USA, and I've found something to enjoy in most of their albums actually, although I've never quite been blown away by any of them. To put it simply, the magic I spoke about earlier that I love to find in black metal is too often missing for me in a lot of blackgaze music. So, about Alcest. I first heard Alcest a few years ago now when I was played their, at the time, new album called Kodama, and I thought it sounded pretty great. It seemed to be taking some of the intensity usually associated with black metal and smoothing down the edges, which potentially could be removing a lot of the magic within the music. But in the case of Alcest, they seem to be capable of smoothing these edges down to something more ornate, which did appeal to me, and I ended up giving Kodama a 3.5 rating. And when they announced the follow-up album Spiritual Instinct in 2019, I was on board. I remember being a bit thrown by the lead single from the album called Sapphire, which had an almost indie rock sound rather than anything even close to metal to my ears. But the album arrived and I loved it. That album has a kind of vulnerable emotion to it that is something I've not quite heard the way Alcest do it in any other metal music. And even Sapphire seemed to make more sense once it was in the context of the whole album. I just found all the songs on the album to be so memorable and engrossing. I ended up giving the album a 4.0, and I started to consider myself a fan of Alcest. But the more I would speak with fans of the band and look at ratings on RateYourMusic of their discography, I started to get the impression that I was missing something very important. The fact that their very first album seems to be the one most beloved by fans. Not to mention, if you take a look at the RateYourMusic chart for the blackgaze genre, while the top rated albums do belong to Deafheaven, the number 3 slot is this debut album by Alcest. So if I'm going to have a good understanding of the blackgaze genre, I figure I definitely need to hear this album. And as a fan of Alcest, I'm excited to hear it. So in this video, I'm going to be listening to Souvenirs d'un autre monde for the very first time and giving you my immediate reaction and thoughts after each song. If you enjoy the video, please click the like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more reactions and reviews. So, time to listen to the album. Track 1 is called Printemps émeraude, or Emerald Spring. Okay, so that was Printemps émeraude. Excuse my French pronunciation. I already love the sound of the album. I love the sound of it from the moment it started. It sounds so spacious, and I definitely felt pulled into the other world that the album title speaks of. I did think some of the melodies, some of the chord sequences were maybe slightly too sunny for my liking, lacking intensity in some way. But as often happens with Alcest for me, they do somehow manage to pull me into it enough that it works. Once the vocals came in, I was quickly reminded of the band 𝐿𝐴, the shoegaze doom metal band of Justin Broadrick. I don't know all of 𝐿𝐴's discography, but I know their early stuff very well. And this reminded me of that stuff in the best way possible, in terms of its beauty on top of intensity. All the instruments seem to be very well played to a high standard so far, which I'm quite impressed by because I've read that everything on this album is being performed by Neige, the lead guy, including the drums. And I have to say they sounded great here. I mean, they're probably to a higher standard than in a lot of other one-man bands that I can think of. The ending of this song was also very appealing. I loved the huge chord changes that started to come in, and with the vocals on top, it started to sound a bit like My Bloody Valentine, again in a really good way. So I really enjoyed the combination of sounds across this first track. So time to get into track 2, which is the title track, Souvenirs d'un autre monde. All right, so that one sounded even more like My Bloody Valentine at times, but Neige has such a distinct sound to his voice and the way he writes the music, and with the sound of black metal very obviously present in the way it's presented. Again, I'm finding the combination to be very satisfying. There was even more really nice drumming on this song, and I'm even wondering why Neige felt the need to bring in another drummer later. He seems very proficient on all the instruments he's playing here. He's also doing a really great job of making this music sound emotionally uplifting without descending into cheesiness, which is quite a delicate balance to achieve. Personally, it reminds me of the Danish band 𝐿𝐴, who also incorporate shoegaze elements, but for them it's into a progressive indie rock kind of sound. But I love that band, and this does remind me of the feeling I get from that band in the best way. It doesn't sound the same necessarily, but the feeling I get is similar, and I appreciate that. The next song, track 3, is called Les Iris, which means irises. That's a beautiful chord sequence. Beautiful. Wow. I really loved the immediate hugeness of the sound of this one. And the vocals came in sounding beautiful. I was actually reminded even more of 𝐼, which I didn't expect at all, to be honest, but it sounded fantastic. The way the vocals kind of soar in that almost innocent sounding way over the heavy music, that's something 𝐼 do so well, but obviously Alcest are bringing so much more of a metal sound into it. And again, I'm just loving the combination. I'm blown away by the production on this thing. I mean, it just sounds massive, yet so clear and defined. Even through the huge walls of distorted guitars, you can hear the clean vocals and lead guitar lines so clearly. Now, the first half of this song was brilliant, but the second half is probably my favorite moment on the album so far. What a beautiful chord sequence. And the way it built was just perfect. It was magical. Loved it. So the next song is called Ciel, errant, or Wandering Sky. Okay, so I have to say that one was kind of less harmonically interesting to me than the last few songs. It sounded a lot simpler and not with too much depth for me. Obviously, this is just on first listen. The sound of the album continues to be beautiful and clear, and I love it for that. And the vocals sounded great, soaring over the top of the music. But yeah, I wasn't too taken with this one. The acoustic guitar part didn't do it for me. It just sounded too straightforward, I think. Well, let's see what track 5 has to offer. It's called Sur l'autre rive, je t'attendrai, which means on the other shore, I will wait for you. Okay, I enjoyed that one quite a bit. Straight away, I was taken with the intensity of the track right from the start. And when the guest vocals came in from singer Audrey Sylvian, I was very pleased with the sound. It sounded great. This album has a lot of romance to my ears. It always sounds like it's kind of wistfully singing to somewhere far away. And there seemed to be a folk influence in the chord sequence, the main chord sequence of this song at the start, which I liked very much. I thought it worked really well. But then we had 2 further sections through this song, which were really welcome changes. So yeah, I really like this one. So that just leaves us with track 6, which is the last song. And its title is in Irish. It's called Tir Nan Og, which means Land of the Young. Here we go. Beautiful ending to a very romantic album. I loved the fantastical sound of this song. It sounded almost like a soundtrack to a journey into another world. The acoustic rhythms did give me kind of a Irish vibe. It was definitely more folky anyway, more folky sounds like the last song. And I did really like that. Yeah, it's a nice ending. So to sum up my feelings about this album, I did really enjoy it for the most part. I suppose a part of me was expecting the album to be more black metal because that's a usual kind of trajectory for a band like this, to start more intense and become more maybe lush as time goes by. But in this case, I don't think that's what happened, because this album was already very lush. And I mean, that last song wasn't metal at all. I just got a lot of very folky sounds, a lot of shoegaze influence, of course. And with metal, black metal, being just one color that he seems to be painting with on this album. I've read that at some point Alcest entirely dropped the black metal from their sound. In the middle of their career, they went entirely shoegaze, I believe. I haven't heard that middle era material yet, but listening to this album now, I can believe it, because it sounds like they already have one foot in that direction anyway. And as I've said, it's such a great combination that he makes on this album with these sounds, and I really enjoyed listening to it. The album does a really great job of painting this other world that he seems to be sending us these songs from. I really felt myself buying into it, especially around track 2 or 3. There was definitely some magic to be felt around there. If you've enjoyed this reaction and review, please consider supporting my channel with the link in the description to buy me a coffee. I'll really appreciate any support you can give me to help me keep making these videos. Now we're going to head over to Rate Your Music and take a look at some of the comments to see what people are saying about this album. So here we are on the Rate Your Music page for Souvenirs d'un autre monde. And as you can see, it has a 3.63 from about 9,000 ratings, which puts it at 4,373 of all time. But as I mentioned earlier, if we go to the blackgaze chart, you can see that the album is considered the 3rd greatest in the genre of all time, shortly followed by their 2nd album, so I'll look forward to hearing that one at some point as well. Now heading back here, we can go down to the track ratings, and we can see that the first 3 tracks on the album seem to be the most beloved ones, with the last 3 also having high ratings but not quite as high. Now, I did mention in my reaction that the only track that I wasn't too keen on was track 4, but there doesn't seem to be any indication that that track is considered any lesser by most people. So I suppose that's just going to be my own personal preference in this case. As you can see, it says Neige handled all instruments, vocals, and also engineered the album himself. So this really is his project in its entirety. Now let's take a look at some comments. Clear Moon said that crunchy black metal guitar tone is delicious. And yeah, I have to agree. And it works so well in the context that he's using it here. Way better than you might expect, actually. It sounds great. Days of Brixton said, I love how most of negative comments on this album comes from metal fans. I don't know if that's true. I haven't thoroughly enough checked, but that is disappointing if that's the case, but perhaps not so surprising because, as I said in my review, it seems to have one foot away from metal at all times. Just using some of the sounds, really, like mainly the guitar tone, whereas all the structure and the songwriting, the vocals, it all seems to be coming from another place entirely. 𝐿𝐴 said, I want a whole album like the last song. And yeah, I could understand that sentiment. It was a really interesting track and not like the rest of the album. I'm not sure if they did anything like that in the future. This comment's from 2016, so perhaps not. In response to the last comment, 𝐿𝐴 said it's named Shelter. So I guess I should check out Shelter. Now, Flying Veggie Monster said Ciel errant is the most underrated track here. Gotta be one of the most beautiful songs ever. Now you see that does fly in the face of how I felt about it. I can't say I felt much from that song, but it is interesting to me that someone would feel so passionately about it. It makes me wonder if it might grow on me after a few more listens. There seems to be a lot of arguing going on around what genre of music this was, I guess. At the time of many of these comments, the blackgaze genre wasn't agreed upon yet to even exist, perhaps. But Golden Chord said too heavy to be shoegaze, too soft to be black metal. And I think that's about right. And that's why probably a new genre title was needed to describe this music. Squiggly Bob said, when a black metal album is labeled as spring, soothing, warm, peaceful. Yeah, it does sum up quite well what's rather different about this album. It's certainly not trying to scare anybody with its sound. If anything, it's quite inviting. Teglement said, I played Tir Nan Og for my wife and she said this sounds like Coldplay. Oh shit. Ishan said, whatever genre it is, it's beautiful. Yeah, I have to agree. Well, that's about the end for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more reactions and reviews like this one. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy.